No one has a monopoly on the truth. Our version of our own truths are based on our own lived experiences. In this space, we welcome different perspectives to learn, unlearn, and enlighten. Welcome to The Lantern. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of The Lantern podcast. I'm so excited to be welcoming Ananda de Jager, very interesting surname, like Jaeger bomb. I'm gonna just welcome you first because your bio is actually really long. You've done a lot, so welcome.
Thank you.
So for guests, Ananda is a Dutch girl who's living in Geneva, Switzerland. She's currently the head of new services at King Influencers. She is a nutrition health coach and a qualified yoga instructor. She's also the author of Poems of Recovery. She's an ex-model. She holds a Master of Science degree from the Rotterdam School of Management. She speaks 4 languages, and I cannot forget to include that you like drinking overpriced lattes, which was
Yeah.
my favorite. So, I mean, what are the 4 languages that you speak?
So Dutch, because I'm from the Netherlands and I grew up in Germany. So
Okay.
naturally, I learned German there. And then because the Netherlands is quite a small country, we learn English quite young through TV and other media. So English and French, because I live in Geneva. I used to live in Brussels. So French is really a must in these cities.
Wow. I mean, that is a great range of diverse cultures that you've been exposed to. If you don't mind me asking, what's been the motive behind all the moves?
I think it was also to get new experiences and sometimes also a little bit to run away. I think everybody who's been on the personal development path at one point has to be really honest with themselves. But yeah, my dad, he was always traveling when I was younger. So kind of the travel bug started with me there with him traveling so much. I was like, oh, that's so cool. I want to do the same. And then sometimes just like, huh, I don't like it here anymore. Let's start completely fresh in a new country.
Yeah. So what is it about starting afresh that you think you like the most?
Well, I'm a bit mixed because I also really like my routine and to know what I'm going to do, a bit of a control freak. But starting fresh, you always think like, oh, I'm going to go to a new country, I'm going to be a new person. You're not, you're the same person in a country where you don't know anyone. But it's also the experience. I think going out of your comfort zone, that's where you really learn to adapt, to be flexible, and you discover that actually you're capable of way more than you thought.
I love that. And I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I myself have stayed now in 3 places, South Africa, Australia, and London currently. So, we're aligned on that personal development journey and believing that, moving away from what's familiar is what helps you grow. But, yeah, very uncomfortable, I must say. I haven't been to the places that you've mentioned, but now that we know each other and once we become better acquainted, perhaps you'll invite me.
Of course, you're always welcome. But the trips you made, they sound, I mean, I traveled around the world, but living really, it's mostly in Europe. But if comparing London, South Africa, and Australia, that's, you're talking different continents and time zones here.
Yeah, it's been quite a varied experience, and it's hard, I think, to describe to people who haven't really experienced it. Because as you say, like I think as a tourist, you experience a place very differently as opposed to when you stayed. I think once you've settled for longer than 6 months to a year, that's when you can actually have a real understanding of the place and the culture and the people, the nuances. Anything shorter than that is just like holiday, like touristy, like, yeah, I don't think sort of have a good understanding of the country.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree.
Cool. So let's get into your lengthy credentials now. Um, let's first and foremost talk about the yoga. So, what inspired you to become a yoga teacher? How has yoga changed your life, and how has movement changed your life? I'm separating them because I guess for people that don't know, yoga is like the overarching, but there's the 8 limbs of yoga, which comes with the breath work, meditation, and then the philosophy, and then the way of life, and so on and so forth. So for the viewers that don't know, that's the reason why I'm separating the concepts. But over to you now to explain, why did you want to become a yoga teacher?
So in the beginning, I never understood people who did yoga. Especially, I was the person that would go to a class. I would be like, everything hurts. I'm not flexible. Shavasana, people just laying there, not for me. I'm going to leave. And then one day I decided I want to learn a handstand. And for some reason, I had this handstand coach slash yoga teacher on Instagram that I followed. I was like, well, she seems to be doing a good job. Let me hire her as my coach and just learn to do a handstand. But with a handstand, of course, comes because I've never done a handstand when I was a kid. I've never been upside down. I didn't know how to do anything. So with starting with the coach, it became that you cannot just jump into a handstand like that. I couldn't even kick up at the wall. And then in those programs that I was doing with her, more and more. We also included other yoga poses. I started following her classes, and she has really tough vinyasa classes because I'm a person that generally is not very calm. I like to be productive. I like to do a lot of stuff. If I have to sit down, which a lot of people, I guess, have, sitting down with yourself can be really uncomfortable. So that was kind of my entry into yoga. So I worked with her for 1.5 years when my job situation changed. They did a restructuring at the company I was working at, and I was let go. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I can do a yoga teacher training. Why not? Because for those who don't know, yoga teacher training, it's one of the most accessible trainings in the world. You don't need to have any experience. You can go somewhere for 200 hours and get your certificate. So I posted on Instagram, is somebody going to a yoga teacher training in February? And then a friend from New York answered, yeah, I just booked one. You want to go together? So I go, okay, let's go to India together. So very spontaneous. And there I learned also more about the 8 limbs of yoga, the different things. I got more into yin yoga, ashtanga, and not just handstanding because everything is linked. And I felt with the more flexibility I got in my body, the more flexibility I got in my mind and in my daily life. And same with the strength. The stronger I got, because for a handstand, for example, you need to be super focused. Everything needs to be aligned. So what I was learning there was useful for the rest of my life, career, however you want to call it, to build resilience. And then the other 8 limbs of yoga, I think through the movement, I found more peace, more calmed. Now I'm able to meditate. I'm able to sit a little bit longer. So, and of course, being in India is just a very overwhelming experience. It's very different than Europe, but it's a beautiful country.
So you've said quite a lot, and of course, I want to like pick at a lot of things that you've said. How long were you in India for?
We were there for 5 or 6 weeks. So the yoga teacher training was 3 weeks,
Yeah,
3.5.
yeah,
And then we did the Golden Triangle, which is Delhi, Jaipur, and Agra. A little bit typical tourist right there.
yeah.
Very different from being in a yoga teacher training center, I can tell you.
So what do you think called you at the point when you got let go in your company to pursue the teacher training? Because I mean, you could have done a variety of things. Why do you think you were called to pursue that?
I felt like it was going to help me in my journey, also with the flexibility, etc., and learning more about the concepts, the Ayurveda as well. And my name also comes from Indian. So Ananda, it means bliss or the happy one in yoga. So it's kind of, I had to go, right, if my name is coming from that country. Um, so I just started dating my now husband. I think we were dating for 6 months. So that's why also it was just those 5 or 6 weeks because I wanted to see him again after. Um, so yeah.
All right. So now talking about the journey to handstand, I actually still can't do the freestanding handstand for longer than 5 seconds. I don't have the alignments in the body yet. I haven't exactly found the center point, but it was one of those peak poses that I work to yearly. But I don't know, like I think I have a blockage in my shoulders because I carry my stress here, so I don't have the opening all the time to get into there. But what would you say for you is probably like the most valuable thing you learned on that handstand journey?
So when I started with my coach, she was like, "We're gonna get you there within 6 months on your birthday. You'll do 20 seconds in the middle of the room." No way. Impossible. Like people who have tried to learn a handstand from zero, it's going to take years. And I think that has taught me patience because I'm still training. Like you, I'm not able. If you tell me now, hop on in a handstand, I need a wall. Probably I will smack a little bit against it. So it's taught me that if I have a goal, I have to commit every day. So every day I'm training for it, but I don't know when I'm going to get it. It can be in a month, it can be in 2 years, but it shows you a lot about commitment and dedication to having a goal.
I love that you said that. And in one of the yoga studios I went to, the quote that they had was that yoga is about the journey, not the destination. And I think that that really resonates with me, and I carry that through my practice. I mean, I know that people who know me and know my practice will consider me an advanced practitioner, but because it's a never-ending journey, I know there's so many postures that are still very inaccessible to me. As much as yes, I have grown and advanced in the practice. Last year, I started doing Ashtanga yoga and realized I know nothing about that. And then, getting into those complicated binds, I was like, okay, here we go. So it's me versus my ego all over again because I got really good at, the vinyasa. I mean, like, I was going to ask you now about your yin experience, because yin for me is like it's a special type of yoga on its own. Like, I couldn't do yin for the longest time because, like you, I had a lot of restless energy. I'm very active. I've got a lot of energy. So to just sit there in those postures, and when you get into the fascia and it hurts so much, and you're like, it's only been 30 seconds. That for me was also very confronting. So, how was your first yin experience, if you can remember?
So I got into yin because when I got my yoga teacher certificate, my friends asked me to teach yin. And I thought, okay, here's a challenge they're going to give me. Like I can hop into a handstand or some pincha pose, but can I sit in a pose for 5 to 10 minutes? No. So it was interesting. I think I had often more struggles with the poses than my students because they seemed fine staying in the poses for 3 to 5 minutes. And at 3 minutes, I was like, oh, this is like not even halfway there. How do people do this for 10 minutes? But I think you feel so good after that in a way you keep coming back to it. And I also often feel that yoga, it releases emotions that are stuck, which might be a little bit more the case with yin than, for example, with ashtanga, because you stay in so long. So I have definitely cried in yoga classes and been like, oh my God, this is the worst. Why am I doing this? Releasing blockages that are stored in the body, right?
Yeah, I think anyone who's gone that far definitely has a love-hate relationship. And I, like you, I think in the beginning was also like, oh, this is very easy, very doable, until I actually got into it and I realized, okay, it's actually very difficult. And it's not just only the inversions, like your handstands that are quite difficult. Even like just sitting in your meditation quietly is also quite challenging because we're quite overstimulated and our nervous systems are quite dysregulated. So now all of that comes to the surface and you're just like, wow, like I'm really successful in real life, but like in yoga life, not so much.
Yeah, exactly. Confronted with yourself often.
Yes, and this is what going to be my segue to ask you about your nutrition course. So, what made you now pursue that? Because in the yoga course, yes, we have the Ayurveda part of the course. What made you then pursue the nutrition on top of the Ayurveda?
This was also because of the restructuring of the company that I was let go of, and they offered us the opportunity to choose some studies. And I thought, hey, why not do something completely different? And this stems mostly from, I mean, you mentioned my book. I've modeled when I was younger. I had an eating disorder, which is not necessarily linked to modeling, but of course, having such strict requirements in modeling doesn't help when you have a tendency for an eating disorder. And I just wanted to learn more about how the body works, how the mind works, because it's a more holistic nutrition coach. So it's not like, oh, you only can eat this. This is a great diet plan. It's really looking at the different factors of life, like how, yes, your nutrition, but how are you feeding yourself with your family, with your friends? How's your home environment? All those kind of things. So I saw this course a few times, I think on Instagram with other people, and I thought, hey, let's try it more for myself in the beginning. I really wanted to just study the topic more for myself. So I haven't actually done anything with the degree yet.
Okay. Well, I honestly think that's amazing. It's really good that I think you had the mindset of wanting to learn more, even though you were in a difficult circumstance. Because, I mean, I can imagine most people won't react to being let go in that manner and be like, "Oh, cool, let me just take up another course." Do you think that you already had sort of an agile mindset before you were let go, and that's why you were able to overcome the hurdle? Like, what do you think separates you from other people who may get stuck at that point?
Well, I did go through the cycle of grief, you know, the anger, the sadness, etc. Some phases took a bit longer than others, but there was also this belief like maybe this is supposed to happen for a reason. I think this is a mindset that a lot of people adopt because it can help them deal with difficulties. Like, okay, maybe I don't see now why this is happening, but maybe in a few years when I look back, it will make sense. So that definitely helped. But that being said, it wasn't easy and it was a job I adored. I absolutely loved my job. So that was tough. But I still think that looking back, maybe it was supposed to happen. I still don't know why. But it has taught me a lot as well. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to go to India or to take all these courses. Or to start at Kingfluencer. So that's definitely some positive points that came out of it.
Yeah, so I mean, for anyone who might be listening and, potentially might be going through a layoff at this point, what advice would you give them just trying to navigate that moment and those stages of grief that you spoke of?
Think it's important to acknowledge your feelings first of all. Like I knew that I was sad I knew I was in denial in the beginning for sure. I stayed in denial for very long because I stayed 150% committed and I was like if I'm only going to stay here for 4 more months, then I'm going to give everything I have and try everything I can. Like I think 3 weeks before my last day, I organized a Christmas event. I was like I'm going to make the most of it if I'm never going to come back, which was kind of denial, right? You could have also been like, okay, well, this company is letting me go, so I'm not going to give it anything anymore. And then allowing the sadness and the anger by talking to other people, focusing on myself first. So, of course, when you're let go, you often end up in unemployment. Depends on the country, but in Switzerland, it's quite well organized. I got a coach, etc. And trying to keep a positive mindset. It's a challenging job market, but I think if you go into it thinking, wow, I'm going to find a job super fast, I'm super positive, somebody will value me for who I am and what I have to offer, that finding a job or starting your own business is way easier.
Thanks for sharing that, and I'm sure that somebody listening and going through it will, be able to take some positive points. Let's talk about poems of recovery. This was a young girl's path to recovering from an eating disorder and anomorrhea. I just want to read on the back of your book. You have this lovely quote that really stood out for me. It's like, it says, my jeans are getting tighter, but my eyes are shining brighter. My thoughts are getting lighter. I always knew I was a fighter. I love that. I read that and I was like, I do want to get the poems because I feel like it's just beautifully written. It was very captivating. Um, so take us through now the eating disorder and your path to, putting together poems of recovery.
I think my eating disorder, if I'm completely honest, started when I was in puberty. I think I was quite insecure. I wanted to look good. I wanted to fit in. I wanted to feel good enough. And then I found all the girls in the magazine always so beautiful. And of course, I mean, I'm quite lucky. I'm quite tall and naturally I'm slim, but in your head, it's like, oh, am I slim enough? Your body starts to change in puberty. So that just started with eating less. Like I wasn't eating enough for what I was doing or the age that I had. And then when I was 15, I started modeling. So of course that was a nice excuse to say, oh no, I'm eating enough. It's just, I have to watch my weight, my measurements, everything's fine. And then I traveled for a year when I was 18 as a model, which was great. Some months were a bit stricter than others. And then at the end, at my last trip, I completely let go of everything. I ate baklava every day. I gained 10 kilos and I started university. And I remember just not feeling like myself, like uneasy in my skin. I started dating someone, and from the beginning, he said, if we're done studying, we break up. And I was like, okay, that's weird because if you love someone, why would you break up when you're done studying? But I kind of kept hoping that we would get back together and that he would stay. But no, 4 years in university, we both went our own paths, and I didn't want to feel the pain. So I just stopped eating is a big word, but I just cut out so much food and I went to Milan for my exchange. So it was again a perfect excuse to say, oh no, it's normal that I'm this skinny. Like it's normal that I'm not getting my period. I just quit the pill and I'm just skinny for the modeling, but no, I'm healthy, like complete denial. Um, and then after a while, I was like, okay, you have to admit there's a problem. Your period hasn't been back in a year. You know you're too skinny. People are telling you. But in a way, I was also proud. I was like, wow, I created this body, right? I mean, based on under eating and over exercising, but I did it. And then in the process of recovering or admitting that, I thought, okay, I'm just going to write down my process first to share it with other people so that if they're going through the same, they know they're not alone. On the other hand, to keep myself accountable. If I admit there's a problem, then people know there's a problem. And then if they see me declining, they can say, hey, wait a second, you're not doing the right thing here. So it was kind of to set myself up for success in recovery so that if I would fall back or whatever, people could say, hey, wait a second, what you're doing here is not normal.
Yeah. I mean, that's, yeah, this is a hectic story for me because I guess I was quite taken aback by the effect that emotions can have, and you linking that to your eating disorder. Which emotion would you think it specifically is, if you can identify one?
I would say I didn't want to feel the pain or sadness.
So
And
it
the
was more suppression as opposed to
yeah,
actually feeling. Okay.
because if you don't eat, your body's going to be focused on that, and it's very hard to be in tune with your emotions because you're only constantly busy with your hunger or what you look like.
Yeah. So how long did it take you to recover?
My period came back, I think, after a year of not having it. So quite, or was it fast? I don't know. Maybe 1.5, or you had it on and off, and then it was perfect. But to really let go of every single eating rule, every single little thing, or you start to instead of, for example, not eating enough, you go into weightlifting and then you're bulking or you're cutting and you're counting calories, which is kind of the same but twisted differently. So I would say since 2 3 years it's really better since I moved to Switzerland. So I guess in total maybe 4 years. I mean, I didn't keep track of the
Yeah.
exact time, but I think yeah, something like this.
But, I think a lot of people go through certain challenges, experiences in life, right? But what do you think motivated you to actually start sharing your experience?
Yeah, really to not fall back, to actually be smarter than myself in a way. Like if I'm sharing,
Yeah,
then people will see if something is wrong and they can keep me accountable. So more the accountability.
yeah.
And I think a lot of people also feel alone in what they're going through or what they're doing. So sharing it with others, yeah, can help someone. Of course, some people are also very negative, right? They people say the worst things online, but if you can help one person, that's already enough.
I love that. And I think that it's something that you probably don't give yourself enough credit for because not everybody is going to want to be vulnerable and share. And I definitely know all about the social media hate. I mean, personally, I wasn't a person that was active on social media, prior to starting my own business, but the role just requires that I have that level of visibility. And I don't really have a problem with sharing, but you also have to take into account, am I going to not share because of a little bit of backlash? But whereas you're helping, as you say, even if you're helping one person, it's more than enough. But you do need to start building sort of like a thick skin, and not care what people think ultimately, because it's your own journey, and there's so much more strength in your vulnerability than you just keeping quiet when you could be helping, even if it's just one person.
I think a lot of people also have this blockage, like who am I to share? Why would people care about my story? These kind of things. But everybody has something to share in the end.
Yeah, I definitely love that, and that's something that I also had to overcome psychologically. But I didn't realize that, I think people have a misconception that people that are sharing think too much of themselves, but it's actually the opposite, because when you get to a point where you can start sharing, it's you actually not having an ego because you don't deem yourself important enough for people to actually stop and be like, oh, hey, she posted. You're just like, people are busy, they have their own lives. Like, if it's going to reach the right person, then that's it. That's my intention, and that's what's going to happen. But you're not going to be focusing on, hey, look at me, look at me. So I think just as a society, we have like the wrong perception about people that are putting their work out there.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Well, you mentioned that you do believe that emotions get trapped in the body. And that's something that I also believe in. And it's something that, I've also delved deeper into. I don't know if you've read The Body Keeps Score.
Yeah, I have it at home. I was thinking about this book.
Oh, really? Wow. I feel like I think it's recommended from by every yoga school when you do the teacher training, because it just sort of like crystallizes all of the principles and the philosophy and you understanding body mind connection. Um, so just for those maybe that don't understand trauma and emotions and how these show up as blockages in the body, you maybe want to give one example of an emotion, a blockage, how that shows up in the body.
Tough question. I think for me, I like to have things very structured. I'm a bit of a control freak, so to say.
Yeah.
And I feel like my body is not as flexible as it could be. So
Yeah.
all those hip openers and things, and people told me you will get more flexible and it will come, and I'm like, I just feel like I'm so stuck. What do I do?
Yeah.
Um, or you, there's also this other book by Louise L. Hay.
Hmm.
I forgot the name in English, but she also tracks illnesses that are linked to, for example, affirmation. So they say, for example, if you have knee problems, it also means you're not going very flexible through life because you're quite stuck, or like literally carrying the weight on your shoulders. That's people who, like you said in the beginning, that you feel like your shoulders are not open. Yeah, because you carry all the weight in your shoulders. So I think those kind of things are some examples of how emotions can get stored in the body.
Yeah. So how long would you say it took you to start releasing some of those negative emotions from the body?
I think it depends on which emotions and how deep it is. And one of the frustrating things maybe of such a journey is that it's never done. You
Yeah.
like release one thing and then something else comes up and something else, and you're like, where is all of this coming from?
Yeah. I love that you say that because I feel the exact same. And, I think especially when you reach your peak pose and if you go into another pose and you need to learn that, that's when now you realize that, okay, cool, like my shoulders might be really open now, but now my hips are tight. And then maybe the right side is a lot tighter than the left side. And then you need to go and investigate with the yin and the yang energy and the masculine and the feminine. And, that's why it's something that you can't really get bored with. I think when you do decide to journey inwards, because there's so much to learn, you also realize that's how you can never really know it all because every day I find out something new, even as a teacher. So it's kind of like why I like to say I'm in a dual role of teacher and student because I don't stop my own learning, even though I'm teaching. I try and like oscillate between the two.
Oh yeah, for sure. You're never done learning. It's a trap.
I mean, I think this one it's a good trap because I think it goes to your personal development and your healing journey. So I think it's a trap that I like being in, but it's definitely one that you can spiral in.
Yeah.
So, what types of yoga do you teach, and how would you say that movement has positive effects on mental health, emotional well-being?
So I teach yin and vinyasa, and in the past months, I've been teaching prenatal yoga because I'm expecting a little baby anytime soon. Could be today or in 4 weeks. And I find vinyasa very interesting because you can kind of build your own class and your own flow. And yin, like we said, you have one class, you have 5 or 6 poses, and then it's over because you stay in the poses for so long. And how it has helped, I feel like yoga really, or movement, I like to go for walks as well. It calms down my mind. I feel more, I like to do it in the morning, yoga, and then throughout the day, do 1 or 2 walks. And it really helps to just clear the mind, be in the moment, be in your own space, and start the day in a better energy. I also feel like movement gives you energy. A lot of people, when they're tired, they don't want to move, they want to sit down. But what they don't realize is that when you give energy to movement, you're creating energy, which is a more positive spiral than sitting down and feeling the weight sink on you.
Yeah, that's very true. But I think also a common misperception with the movement is that, the pace needs to be vigorous or you need to be doing a lot. And that's one thing I also have come to learn myself with yoga is that you don't need to do a lot. You can be gentle and subtle in your movements, but it can be doing so much for you. So that's something that I personally liked and enjoyed about practicing yoga as a movement practice.
Yeah. It takes some time to get used to it because me, I used to be super good at hit training, and I don't like running, but I did some half marathons because I was like, that's good for your body. Like here you're really working out, sweating, etc. But when you go into yoga, it can be much more subtle and maybe even in the long term better for your body.
Yeah, I mean, there are studies that do show that it's better for the body because I think like something like running is actually quite violent on the body. So I myself am actually also a retired half marathon runner. Because just the impacts on your knees, of course, the people I'm sure they'll come and argue that Ashtanga yoga has equal strain on your knees. But again, of course, alignment and things need to be in place so that you always protecting your knees. But I do think that there are some activities that we've just been socialized to think that are maybe better for your body, whereas that may not necessarily be the case. You actually need to go in and investigate what's best for you And I think I would rather choose movement that will benefit my body and mind versus just the body, and then you leave the mind behind.
I think it can also be very different for women, right? We have a 28-day cycle, whereas men have more of a 24-hour cycle. So even depending on where we are in our cycle, different movement can work better or worse. I don't know it exactly by heart, but we all know that on our period, it's probably not the best idea to do HIIT, whereas after you get like this boost of energy. So it could be great for you again. So this is also very dependent, and I think something we've lost a little bit along the way.
100% agree with you. But do you think that you knowing your body in this manner came from yoga? Because it seems like intuitively you seem to know about your body clock, what to do, when to do. Do you think that that knowledge came through yoga?
Now, one of my friends has a company in seat cycling, so that's where it came from. But I also gotta admit that no matter where I am in my cycle, I will get upside down because I have a goal. But I might try a little bit more yin or to slow down, or I notice I'm a bit more hungry at certain points. But I'm also not perfect in what I do.
Yeah. But I think that's also one of the things about the journey is that it's not striving for perfection. It's just showing up for yourself every day, and just being the best that you can for you, not for anybody else. So even in your handstand, it may not be the perfect handstand, but it's yours. So that's what makes it perfect. And that's one of the things I love, is because with yoga, everyone can practice. So even if you have just like minor adjustments, if you're using your props, you're still in the pose. That's kind of the same with life. Everyone can do life. You just need to adjust it to make it work for you.
Of course, then you also have the ego come in, right? Like, I don't want to use the props. I want to have the pose by myself, be more flexible, be stronger. So that's also a journey of acceptance where you're at and how the body is feeling.
Yeah, I think 100% correct. And definitely lots of that confronting, lots of that ego work, especially when it comes to the props. I personally still use props. I use my blocks and my straps all the time because it actually makes the poses more accessible and it's not as strenuous. And then you're able to, learn the breathing and control your breathing so that when you're not using the props, you're not coming out of the poses too quickly. But again, this is why I like yoga quite a lot, is because it sort of keeps you accountable to yourself and you can sort of also always assess where you are when it comes to just even your shadow work and your ego. Because if I'm trying to do something hard and I'm like, oh, I don't want to do it, then I'm like, I have to ask myself, why don't you want to do it, right? You don't want to do it because you don't want to fail. You don't want to put in the effort. You need to break it down. So that's kind of like what I enjoy the most. So I don't know for you, what would you say you enjoy the most about um, exploring new poses in yoga?
But my ego, and I like it when I get into a pose or when I feel like my body has adjusted in such a way that I go deeper into a pose or I feel stronger or more flexible. Because it's still satisfying. It's in my personality,
Mm.
but I also just enjoy. I'm trying to enjoy more and more the process of getting there. Because once you get into a pose that you really want to get into, it's like, what's next? Instead of enjoying the process, where you are, that you achieve something, I'm kind of a person like, what's next? So I'm really learning to be more in the, okay, you did good. Doesn't matter when you get the pose, if you get the pose, but already opening up a bit more, feeling a bit deeper in your body, that already helps. And even if you might never get there, you might never get there. Like for me, for example, splits, the worst. I've been trying. People told me when you're pregnant, you get this relaxing, you're gonna have your split. I didn't even go 1 centimeter deeper. It's still the same as before. And I'm like, okay, maybe my body is not capable, but I'm going to keep trying and I might never get there.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, I think it's just a matter of, keep trying. But I also think that they just are those poses where, like it may not ever happen. and you might just have to use props for those for the rest of your life, and that's also fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a really funny one with your splits. Um, so I mean, how do you feel now, being pregnant, um, with the background that you have with your, eating disorder and your menstrual cycle? How are you actually feeling? Did you think that that was a possibility for you?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons I recovered was because I wanted to maybe one day have kids.
Mm.
And we got quite lucky because I was really well on my cycle, etc. So it happened quite fast. And then knowing that it was coming, it was also even more reason to take care of myself and my body because it's not just about me anymore. It's also about the little one.
Mm. Yeah.
But it's really forcing me to slow down, which I have a bit of difficulty with sometimes. But
Yeah.
yeah, now is really the time to slow down.
Yeah. But I guess maybe it's just that this is this is the time for you to learn that lesson in your life. But I think that that's a really amazing story of you recovering and being able to have a child. Because, there are some stories that I know of people who unfortunately haven't, been had a positive outcome. And it's just one of those things, I guess, where sometimes you don't realize the consequences of your actions, right? Because the eating disorder was early on and was in your adolescence, whereas like you wanting to have a child is in your adult life, yet they're so interlinked.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, what are some of the changes do you think will come to the yoga industry over the coming years?
I'm hoping, because like I said, it's so easy to get your certificate,
Yeah.
that maybe they get a little bit stricter on that. I mean, for me, it was super nice that I got my certificate, but it also, in a way, yes, yoga is for everyone. On the other hand, what I practice is mostly the movement, and there's 8 limbs of yoga. So I'm hoping next to the movement that the other limbs will also get more attention and be seen more as yoga, that people really learn the history and the different aspects because it's a beautiful practice in its eternity.
Yeah. I think that obviously the responsibility is on us as the teachers to educate students about more than just the one limb. And I think in your notes you did mention that a lot of what is seen as yoga is influenced by the mainstream. And I do agree with you on that. I do think that the mainstream hasn't done the best job of accurately reflecting what exactly yoga is. And I think the actual philosophies and the meaning has been lost. And unless you go and pursue that knowledge, in places that are authentic, you may not come out with the knowledge of what exactly yoga actually is.
I think they're also never done learning. Of course, we've done the yoga teacher training, but then it's also up to us or anyone as teachers or students to keep learning, keep diving in, and keep yeah, sharing about the practice and discovering more because the history is so rich. I feel like we only know the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, that's quite true. How would you say you have adjusted your practice now that you're teaching prenatal?
It's slowed down a lot.
Yeah,
It's very slow.
yeah,
Yeah, of course, you cannot do everything, right? You're not allowed to lay on the belly. Certain poses have a counter indication. So it's really been about learning to slow down and adjusting to each student because your body is different every day. But especially when you're pregnant, your body is already different than what it used to be, and then every day is so different. Like it's a wild journey, let's
yeah.
say.
And how
So
would you
really,
say? Oh, sorry, I didn't catch that.
really tuning in,
Oh,
slowing down.
I was going to ask you, how would you say your own practice has changed now that you have baby on board?
I still practice my handstands and my pincha,
Mhm.
which, side note, don't start practicing those if you've never done it and you get pregnant. Only practice those when you're a practitioner or your healthcare provider has given you an okay. So I still practice those, but my practice used to be maybe 1 hour a day, then an extra yoga class, and now it's a very calm 20 to 30 minutes, some movement, some hip opener, heart opener, bit of upside down. So it's more about keeping my strength than really improving my poses and going deeper.
Okay. Well, I love that. And with your prenatal classes, are you teaching other women who are pregnant, or are you still teaching your normal classes but as pregnant?
No, I just focus only on pregnant women, but everybody could join the classes because they were really slow and accessible.
Yeah.
I stopped a few weeks ago because I was like, okay, now my body just wants to do its own thing because you get the reflux, and if you're teaching with reflux and you're in downward facing dog, it's really not fun. So I was like, okay, now is the time to stop, and then maybe after, depending on how the recovery goes, it can be postnatal and then slowly picking back up again into other practices.
Yeah. Okay. Well, would you say there's a huge market for prenatal and postnatal yoga?
Yeah, I think in Geneva there is a market.
Hmm.
The only thing depends, of course, where you're living, and people prefer it in real life instead of online, which makes sense. And it shouldn't be too far from the pregnant woman's house. This I noticed. If they have to travel quite long, the travel by itself is already quite intense.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing all your insights with us. I genuinely enjoyed having this conversation. I mean, I think you're the only other yogi I know who shares their pictures of their yoga poses on LinkedIn. So that was quite refreshing for me to see. I don't know if there's anything further that you would like to leave with the audience as a takeaway from this episode.
No, thank you for having me on. It was really nice to talk to you. And I think, yeah, for people, it's just to keep growing, keep a growth mindset, and be proud of how far you've come. Enjoy the ride, as people say.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the Lantern Podcast. I will definitely link your book, Poems of Recovery, for anyone who may be interested in having a read. I will just read the quote that I liked for those that didn't catch it the first time. But my jeans are getting tighter, but my eyes are shining brighter. My thoughts are getting lighter. I always knew I was a fighter. So, yeah, I hope that everyone has learned how the body does really keep score. And it's important for us to do the work and really go inwards and, introspect as to what the body needs. But that does take a long time, and it's a journey, it's not a destination. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Lantern Podcast, and we will see you on the next one.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Seize the light within yourself with love, the lantern.